In 1921, Mexico built the fourth oldest airline in the world. It flew for 89 years. Then, one day in August 2010, it was sold for 1,000 pesos, about $80, and the next morning it stopped flying forever. This isn't the story of a company that crashed. It's the story of a company that was landed on purpose and stripped for parts. You'll be told Mexicana died from the 2009 recession, or from unions that wouldn't take a pay cut. That's the version someone needs you to believe. Today we follow the money. From the purchase to that 1,000-peso sale, to the 2.85 billion pesos in wages that 8,000 workers still haven't been paid. And by the end, you'll understand the only question that matters: who walked away with the planes, while 8,000 families were left holding the debt? Mexicana de Aviación was founded in 1921, just 18 years after the Wright brothers first got off the ground. That made it Mexico's first airline, North America's oldest airline, and the fourth oldest on Earth, still flying under the same name. At its peak, Mexicana carried over 11 million passengers a year, 6.5 million inside Mexico, 4.5 million abroad. It ran a fleet of nearly 110 aircraft across the airline and its subsidiaries, and held between 28 and 30% of Mexico's domestic market. It flew to the United States, to South America, to Europe. It was the face of a nation in the sky. For generations, Mexicana wasn't a brand, it was a point of pride. Millions of people took their very first flight with that logo on the tail. But in 2005, this 84-year-old airline changed hands. It was bought by a man named Gastón Azcárraga, owner of Grupo Posadas, the largest hotel chain in Mexico. He paid $165 million for 95% of the company. And from day one, the pilots' union said out loud what few wanted to hear. That price was nowhere near what the company was actually worth. Gastón Azcárraga knew hotels, he didn't know airlines. Aircraft leased for hundreds of millions, fuel prices that move without warning, labor contracts written over decades. There was never a real industrial plan. There was only one thing that kept growing: debt. Buy an asset cheap, load it with debt, and let someone else pay the bill. It isn't an accident. It's a play that has gutted airlines all over the world. If you're in the United States, you've seen this playbook before. An airline bought by financiers, loaded with debt, and left in bankruptcy while the people at the top walk away rich. Then the world fell on him. 2009, a global recession, and in Mexico, the flu epidemic that emptied the airports. At the same time, a new generation of low-cost carriers, Volaris, Interjet, Viva Aerobus, moved in and undercut him on price. Mexicana, still carrying its 1990s cost base, couldn't compete. So far, this just sounds like bad luck. But watch what the owner did next. In 2010, with the company drowning, Azcárraga demanded cutting pilots' pay by 41%, flight attendants by 39%, and eliminating 40% of the workforce. The unions, who were trying to buy the airline themselves to save it, refused to sign. And then came the move. Instead of selling the airline to its own workers, Azcárraga transferred 95% of Mexicana to a company called Tenedora K for 1,000 pesos. 1,000 pesos, $80, for North America's oldest airline. Officially, that company was going to inject fresh capital and rescue it. In reality, it was a shell that couldn't and wouldn't pay the debts. Days later, on August 2, 2010, Mexicana filed for bankruptcy protection. The owner demands impossible cuts. The cuts get rejected, and almost simultaneously, the company is handed off for a symbolic price to an entity that appears out of nowhere. There's a term for this in the business world, and it isn't bad luck. Following the money through a collapse like this, separating bad luck from design, takes real fluency in finance and decision-making. Brilliant has interactive courses on exactly that, and I use them. Link below, 30 days free for the first 200. Now, back to August 2010. August 27, 2010. Mexicana's employees are told that at noon the next day, the airline stops flying. On August 28th, Flight 866 lifts off from Mexico City bound for Toronto. It's the last one. 89 years of history switched off. And overnight, more than 8,000 people lose their jobs. Pilots with 30 years in the cockpit, flight attendants, mechanics, ground crew. Overnight, out of work, and without the severance the law had promised them. But the number that really cuts is a different one. Those 8,000 workers were left with 2.85 billion pesos owed to them in wages. Today, 16 years later, they still haven't been paid. And the owner, Gastón Azcárraga, was accused by prosecutors of financial mismanagement and money laundering, and arrest warrants were issued. But by then he had already gone into exile in the United States. And on the final day of one presidential term, the accusations against him quietly evaporated. The warrants were withdrawn. He never spent a day in jail. The workers are still waiting. No charges that stuck, no jail time, no money returned, 16 years of legal limbo, and a debt that just sits there. And here's the final twist. In 2023, the Mexican state decided to bring the brand back from the dead as an airline run by the military with an investment north of 25 billion pesos of public money. The result? In 2025, it lost 941 million pesos, roughly 2.5 million pesos a day. In its first year, the new Mexicana carried an average of 53 passengers per flight. A plane that seats nearly 3 times that, flying half empty. Its planes fly less than half full, a 46% load factor, when an airline needs more than 60 just to stop bleeding. The taxpayer ended up paying twice, once when it was left to die and again to resurrect it. A brand that couldn't survive in private hands now survives only on public money. Flying routes that lose money on every single seat. Mexicana's lesson isn't that unions were too expensive, or that the low-cost carriers were smarter. The lesson is more uncomfortable. An 89-year-old national asset can be bought cheap, drained and abandoned by its owner without a single consequence, if that owner is close enough to power. In the other stories on this channel, the empire kills itself. It fails to see the future. Mexicana is different. Mexicana was killed, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The market didn't fail Mexicana. The people who owned it did, and the system let them. Mexicana is gone. The people who emptied it are not. And that, more than any balance sheet, is the real lesson here. So the next time a company just quietly goes under, ask the only question that actually matters. Who got rich on the way down? Mexicana didn't crash. It was landed, stripped of what was useful, and the debt was handed to the people who kept it flying. Here, the killer wasn't the market. It was the owner and the guarantee that no one would ever send him the bill. But not every story ends this way. There's one that did the exact opposite. Born in Mexico, it conquered the entire planet. And it sold for $20 billion. It's the story of Corona, the perfect mirror image of Mexicana. I'll leave it right here. And subscribe, one empire that rises or falls every week.